Welcome to Better Police Reports. I'm Jean Reynolds. Today's topic is magic. Pick a card any card at all. Magic tricks and magic shows are fun, but we know that there's no real magic involved, that it's an illusion. But language experts say that magical thinking about language is very common. So we're going to be talking about what that might mean and how it might affect police reports. Magic thinking about language means believing that words can alter reality. Here's an example. A young woman is desperately in love with a young man who doesn't even know that she's alive. So she tries to cast a spell by saying his name over and over again. John, 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 believing that magically he will call her for a date. A very common form of magical thinking about language is jinxes. You're driving along with a friend of yours and you say, "Oh, I love this car. So reliable, 65,000 miles, no problems." And your friend sitting next to you says, "Uh-oh, you jinxed your car. You're going to have a breakdown next week." If you're a baseball fan, you know that there's a famous jinx associated with no-hitters. When a pitcher seems to have a no-hitter going, a lot of radio and TV announcers won't say anything about it, believing that they will jinx the pitcher and the next batter to come up will hit a double or a triple. Now, magical thinking. The announcers are up in a booth. They can't change what's going on in the baseball diamond below. Jinx, magical thinking. Now, how might this affect police reports? To explain this, I'm going to set up a little scenario. I want you to imagine that you've just been hired in a supervisory position in an agency that's new to you, so you don't know the officers yet. So you're using various ways to get to know the people you're going to be working with, and one of them might be reading some police reports. I'm going to show you 3 sentences from 3 police reports, and I'm going to ask you to read the sentences and decide which of the officers are trustworthy. Sentence number 1, we'll call this officer Joe. Joe says, "This officer saw red marks on Jane Doe's neck." Officer 2, we'll call her Nancy. "I found a hammer under the sofa." Officer 3, we'll call him Sam. "Smoke was seen coming through the window." Whom do you trust? Who is not trustworthy? What do you think? Well, the answer is you can't tell. You can't judge someone's character on the basis of one sentence. But criminal justice used to believe that you could. And there's one officer here who would not be trusted and who would probably have to get some counseling from a supervisor. Can you guess which one it is? It's Nancy. And not because she's female. Nancy used the word "I." And criminal justice used to believe that if you wrote the word "I" in a report, you lost your objectivity, and what you reported might be colored by your emotions and other biases. So officers were taught a variety of strategies to avoid using that awful word "I." So let's look at what Joe wrote. Instead of saying "I saw red marks," he said, "This officer saw." Fine officer. Credit to the force. He didn't say "I." Let's look at Sam. Sam completely eliminated people from his sentence. "Smoke was seen coming through the window." Excellent officer. Wish we had more like him. Now, thankfully, criminal justice no longer thinks this way, and we realize that saying "I found a hammer under the sofa" is efficient, common sense. It's a good way to write a report. But agencies used to graduate class after class after class of new officers, believing that they had produced officers with integrity and trustworthiness just because those officers had been warned, never put "I" into a report. Again, magical thinking. Now, if this kind of thinking has disappeared, why are we talking about it today? There's a reason. There is a legacy that has lived on even though this kind of thinking has died. And I'm going to do a little magic myself. I'm going to predict that if you get out a few of your recent reports, you're going to find this legacy there. In fact, imagine that we filled up this room with police reports from all over the country. I would bet that most of them would have this legacy in them. All right, what's the legacy? It's our friend Sam here. Passive voice. Smoke was seen coming through the window. I read a lot of reports. I see sentence after sentence after sentence like this one. The suspect was stabbed. The suspect was patted down. The suspect was booked into the county jail. The evidence was booked into the evidence room. You're not saying who did it. Police reports are supposed to be thorough. You're supposed to document everything that everyone did at the scene. If you're writing passive voice, like Sam did, you're not telling who saw the smoke, who booked the suspect, who patted him down, and so on. And that information could cause problems later on. I'm going to give you a story. Officer was testifying in a courtroom, and the defense attorney had some issues with his client's Miranda rights. Well, the report documented the Miranda rights. It said Mr. Jones was informed of his Miranda rights. So the defense attorney said, "Did you inform him of his Miranda rights?" Well, the officer had to stop and think. Passive voice. Mr. Jones was informed. Who did it? And the officer realized, I wasn't the one. It was Officer Wilson. Now that's embarrassing. You're supposed to be on top of things when you go to court. Well, the next question came from the judge. Is Officer Wilson in the courtroom today? No, she wasn't. So everybody had to go home, the trial had to be postponed, and everybody had to wait for Officer Wilson to come back and testify about those Miranda rights. You don't want that to happen to you. So you want to get rid of passive voice. It's a tradition that we don't need anymore. It's not useful. Now, how are you going to get rid of passive voice? Well, you've got two avenues. One thing you could do is to get a workbook and learn all about past tense verbs and past participles and do a lot of exercises. But there's a much simpler way. In your report, always start your sentences with a person. I found a hammer. Officer Smith saw red marks. And so on. Always say who did what. Active voice saves time, avoids confusion. You can learn much more about report writing if you go to my website, www.yourpoliceright.com. Everything there is free and no registration is required. I also encourage you to check out my book, Criminal Justice Report Writing. It's available as a paperback and an ebook. It's inexpensive, and you can see a free preview at Amazon.com. I also invite you to share this video with friends and coworkers. Thanks for watching.